All right, so we've got a ton of stuff in front of us for this deep dive. I mean, we're talking stats, injuries, weather, the whole 9 yards, and it's all about 2 upcoming MLS matches. So what we're going to try to do is make sense of it all, right? Find the stuff that actually matters and kind of give a clear picture of what might happen.
Yep, that's the goal. We want to give you the info you need without making you wade through a sea of numbers. We're focusing on Inter Miami CF versus Philadelphia Union, that's on March 29th, and then San Jose Earthquakes against the Seattle Sounders the next day.
So 2 big games.
Oh, yeah. We're going to try to figure out who's likely to win and why, and maybe unearth some surprises along the way. Let's kick things off with that Miami-Philly game, shall we?
Sounds good. So let's get right to it. What's the big takeaway here? If we look at all this data, who do the models think is going to win this thing?
Well, all our models are pretty much singing the same tune. They're heavily favoring Inter Miami, like really heavily.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We're talking a 58.7% chance of them winning. Philadelphia, on the other hand, is way down at 17.6%, and there's a 23.7% chance it could end in a draw.
Huh. So almost a 60% chance for Miami. That's a pretty strong statement. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I got to ask, how reliable are these models anyway? Like, how often do they actually get things right?
Well, based on past performance, this type of model has an accuracy of about 73%.
Okay, 73%. So not perfect, but not bad.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid track record.
But still, 58.7% for Miami. What exactly are these models looking at to come up with a number like that? I mean, it's soccer, right? It's not exactly physics.
Right. It's definitely not an exact science. But we try to be as comprehensive as possible. So we're talking years of MLS results going all the way back to 2020. We're analyzing how teams perform at home versus on the road, their recent form, whether they're on a hot streak or in a slump. And we're not just looking at basic stuff like wins and losses. We're going deeper. We're analyzing things like expected goals, which measures the quality of the scoring chances they're creating, the number of shots they're taking and allowing, and how strong they are defensively. We even factor in things like the league-wide home advantage.
Okay, so it's more than just who scored the most goals last week.
Oh, yeah, it's much more nuanced than that.
And what about those injured players? And of course, the Messi factor. How does that all play into the predictions?
We definitely factor those things in. Injuries can be huge, especially when it comes to key players. And Messi, well, he's a whole other level, right? He can single-handedly swing the momentum of a match.
Absolutely. So how do you guys take all this raw data, all these different factors, and turn it into something that can actually predict the outcome of a game? It sounds incredibly complex.
It's definitely a multi-layered process. There's a lot of what we call data pre-processing. We have to make sure all the information is in a consistent format, that we're comparing apples to apples. For example, we might standardize stats to a per 90 minutes basis, so we're not unfairly weighting teams that have played more games recently. And we often use rolling averages to smooth out some of the statistical noise and get a better sense of a team's true form over time.
Makes sense. So you're not just taking the numbers at face value. You're really digging into the details?
Yeah, we try to.
Okay. But I'm still curious about how you go from, like, raw data to predictions. Do you sprinkle some magic fairy dust on it?
Well, it might feel like magic sometimes, but it's really just good old-fashioned math and a lot of computing power. We actually engineer some pretty sophisticated metrics from the basic stats.
Engineered metrics, like what? Can you give us an example?
Sure. Take recent form momentum. We created this metric to see which team is currently in better shape. It basically gives more weight to very recent results. We also have metrics that analyze the historical head-to-head record between two teams. So are their games usually close, or does one team tend to dominate?
Interesting.
We also look at how much better or worse a team performs at home compared to away, and then the difference in expected goals. So if one team is consistently creating much better scoring chances than the other. And of course, we quantify how strong a team is defensively and try to figure out how much injuries might affect their performance. And yeah, we have that special metric for Messi's influence on Inter Miami, which is, well, pretty significant, as you might expect.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, so you've got all these metrics, all these different ways of measuring team performance, but how do you combine them to actually predict a winner?
So our main tool is this thing called a Bayesian hierarchical model. Now, I know that sounds kind of complicated, but the basic idea is pretty intuitive. It's like starting with a general idea and then refining it as you get more information. The hierarchical part means we're looking at trends across the entire league, things like the average home advantage, and then using that to make more specific predictions for individual teams.
So it's kind of like looking at the big picture and then zooming in.
Exactly. And this type of model is really good at estimating underlying factors like how strong a team's attack is and how good they are defensively and how those things change based on form, where they're playing, and, well, whether they've got Messi on their side.
So what did this model reveal specifically about Inter Miami and Philadelphia?
Okay, so for Inter Miami, the model estimates their attack strength at about 0.42 and their defense at 0.18. Philadelphia's attack is lower, around 0.28, but their defense is a bit stronger at 0.31. We also see a general home advantage effect across the MLS of about 0.32. And, drumroll please, Messi's impact on Miami's attack is a whopping 0.27.
0.27? Wow, that's huge. So basically, Messi is a walking, talking game changer. But you guys didn't stop with just the Bayesian model, did you? You wanted to be extra sure.
We like to be thorough. So yeah, we also used a bunch of different machine learning models. Think of these as algorithms that learn from past data to spot patterns and make predictions.
Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Maybe a little bit, but it's becoming more and more common in all sorts of fields, especially in sports.
So what kind of fancy algorithms are we talking about?
We used a gradient boosted model, a random forest model, those are two popular ones, and even a neural network. Neural networks are especially powerful when you're dealing with really complex relationships in the data.
Okay, so you're throwing the whole AI arsenal at this.
You could say that. We also used a more traditional approach, an ELO rating system. You might know it from chess, but it can be adapted to soccer with adjustments for things like home advantage.
Got it. So you've got all these different models, each with its own quirks and strengths.
Right.
But how do you actually combine all these predictions? It's like herding cats, right?
It can feel that way sometimes. We use a technique called Bayesian model averaging. It's basically a way to weight the predictions from each model based on how accurate they've been in the past.
So the models that have a better track record get more say.
Exactly. And in this case, the Bayesian hierarchical model had the most weight at 43%, followed by the neural network at 31%.
Okay. And what about the rest of the models? How much weight did they get?
Gradient boosting came in at 16%, the ELO at 6%, and the random forest model at 4%.
All right, so you've combined the predictions from all those models into this supermodel. How did this combined model perform when you tested it on past data?
Well, the ensemble model achieved an overall accuracy of 73.2% and an F1 score of 0.69.
73.2% accuracy, that's pretty good. And what about the F1 score? What does that tell us?
The F1 score is a bit more nuanced. It considers both precision and recall, which is especially important when we're dealing with draws and upsets.
So it's kind of a measure of how well the model captures those tricky situations where the favorite doesn't necessarily win.
Precisely. We also look at other metrics like log loss and Breyer score, which all point to the conclusion that this ensemble approach gives us a very reliable prediction.
But even with the best models, there's always that X factor, right? I mean, what about those injuries? Both Miami and Philly have players who might be out. How much can that change things?
Yeah, injuries can throw a wrench into even the best predictions. So, let's see. For Inter Miami, Campana was initially listed as doubtful with a hamstring issue, but now he's questionable.
So there's a chance he might play.
Yeah, it's still up in the air.
Okay. Who else is out for Miami?
Well, Farias is out for the season, Free's also out, and Redondo had an ankle issue, but he's expected to play.
Okay, and how do those potential absences affect Miami's chances?
Well, our analysis suggests that they could reduce Miami's expected goals by about 0.14. Their defense might be a little weaker by about 0.06 expected goals conceded. And overall, their win probability could drop by around 3.2%. But then again, you've got Messi, who can make up for a lot.
Right. He's like a one-man army. Okay, what about Philadelphia? What's going on with their injured list?
They've got a few more concerns. Gazdag was dealing with a groin injury, but it looks like he'll be ready to play.
That's good news for Philly fans.
Yeah, he's a key player for them. But Martinez is suspended for this game, Trent is out, and Elliott is a game-time decision with a calf strain.
So some big names potentially missing for Philly.
Yeah, it could hurt them. We estimate their offensive output could be reduced by around 0.19 expected goals, and their defense might be weaker by about 0.15 expected goals conceded. Overall, their win probability could drop by a more significant 5.8%.
So potentially a bigger impact than for Miami.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Okay, so we've talked about the models, the stats, and the injuries. But what about the weather? Doesn't that play a role too?
It absolutely can, especially in soccer, where the games are played outdoors. So for Miami, the forecast for match time is 78 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 26 degrees Celsius, with a very low chance of rain, only about 5% now. There'll be a light breeze from the southeast, and the humidity will be around 72%.
78 degrees and humid. Sounds like a typical Miami evening.
Pretty much.
But how will those conditions affect the game itself?
Well, warm and humid conditions can favor teams that are more technical and like to keep possession of the ball. It can be more challenging for teams that rely on high pressing or a more direct physical style. And based on our analysis, these conditions could give a slight edge to Inter Miami, potentially increasing their win probability even more.
Interesting. So the Miami Heat might actually play to their advantage.
It's definitely possible.
All right, so you've crunched the numbers, analyzed the injuries, checked the weather. What's the final verdict? What's your prediction for Inter Miami versus Philadelphia?
Taking everything into account, our final prediction gives Inter Miami a 58.7% chance of winning. Now, it's important to remember that this is just a probability. There's always a chance for surprises in soccer. But our confidence interval suggests that the true probability of a Miami win is likely somewhere between 53.2% and 64.2%. The chance of a draw is 23.7%, with a range of 19.3% to 28.1%. And Philadelphia's chances of pulling off a win are at 17.6%, likely falling between 13.4% and 21.8%.
Okay, so a pretty clear advantage for Miami, but it's not a done deal.
Definitely not. There's still a decent chance for Philly to get a result.
So what about the score? Are we thinking a tight, low-scoring match, or could it be a goal fest?
Our models project that Inter Miami will score around 2.14 goals and Philadelphia about 0.92. Of course, there's a range of possibilities there. But if you're looking for specific score lines, the most likely outcome is a 2-0 win for Miami at 15.8%, followed by a 2-1 Miami win at 14.3%, and then a 1-0 victory for Miami at 12.7%.
Okay, so the models are leaning towards a Miami win by a couple of goals.
Yeah, that's the most likely scenario, but again, anything can happen in soccer.
Right, right. And you also ran some simulations, right? Like thousands of virtual matches based on all these variables. What did those simulations tell you?
We simulated 50,000 regions of the game, and the results were very consistent with our main prediction, giving Inter Miami that same 58.7% win probability.
Okay, so the simulations back up the models.
Yeah.
That's reassuring.
Yeah, it gives us more confidence in our predictions. We also found that there's a 62.8% chance of the match having more than 2.5 total goals and a 53.2% chance of both teams scoring.
So a decent chance for some goals.
Yeah.
But how confident are you in all this, really? I mean, I get that you're using all these fancy models and simulations, but it's still soccer. There's always that element of unpredictability.
Absolutely. There are always going to be surprises. But we've done something called a calibration analysis. It's a way to check if our models are actually as good as we think they are. It basically compares our predictions to actual outcomes over a large number of matches. And the good news is that our models show excellent calibration.
So that means your models are pretty good at predicting what's going to happen.
Yeah, we're pretty happy with their performance.
Okay.
But to your point, there's always uncertainty in any prediction, especially in a sport like soccer. We estimate that about 71% of the uncertainty in our prediction comes from the inherent randomness of the game itself. You know, bad bounces, crazy refereeing decisions, moments of brilliance, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the things that make soccer so exciting to watch.
Exactly. And the other 29% of the uncertainty comes from limitations in our models and the data we have.
Okay, that makes sense. So to wrap up this Inter Miami versus Philly analysis, what are the key factors that are really driving the prediction towards an Inter Miami win?
Well, the Messi effect is definitely the elephant in the room, or should I say on the pitch. His impact on Miami's attack is undeniable.
Right.
But it's not just Messi. The fact that Miami is playing at home is also a big factor, and their recent form has been stronger than Philly's.
Okay.
They're also creating better scoring chances, which is reflected in their superior expected goals differential. And finally, the injuries, which seem to be hitting Philadelphia harder, are also playing a role.
All right, so it sounds like Miami has a lot going for them in this match. But before we move on to the San Jose game, I'm curious, how do your predictions compare to what the betting markets are saying?
Well, that's always interesting to see. It's kind of like comparing our data-driven approach to the wisdom of the crowd.
Right.
So the betting markets actually have Miami as even stronger favorites than our model suggests. They're giving them about a 64% chance of winning.
Wow, so even more confident in a Miami win than your models.
Yep.
Interesting. What about Philadelphia's chances, according to the betting markets?
They're giving Philadelphia a slightly higher chance of winning than we are, about 19%.
Or what about a draw?
The odds on a draw are pretty close to our prediction. This difference between the betting markets and our model could suggest that there might be some value in betting on a draw.
Huh. So maybe the smart money is on the underdog or a tie.
It's possible. We also see some potential value in betting on the game to have over 2.5 goals.
Okay, so maybe some interesting betting opportunities for those who are so inclined.
Perhaps. But remember, always bet responsibly.
Always good advice. Before we move on to the San Jose game, are there any last-minute updates on the injuries or the weather for the Miami-Philly game?
A couple of things. For Inter Miami, Campana's hamstring seems to be improving, so he's now listed as questionable, and Redondo is definitely expected to play. As for Philadelphia, Gazdag's groin issue seems to have cleared up, and he's likely to be in the starting lineup. Elliott's status is still uncertain. It'll be a game-time decision.
Okay, so a few things still up in the air.
Yep. And as for the weather, the forecast has gotten even better for soccer, even lower chance of rain and a bit warmer, which, as we discussed, could give Miami a tiny advantage.
All right, so to quickly summarize the Inter Miami versus Philadelphia Union match, the data strongly suggests a Miami win, but Philly definitely have a chance to pull off an upset. It should be a fun one to watch. But now let's shift gears and talk about the match on Sunday. San Jose Earthquakes against the Seattle Sounders. What's the initial assessment there?
Well, this one looks to be a much closer contest. Our model gives a slight edge to San Jose with a 40.3% chance of winning.
40.3%. So not nearly as dominant as Miami's projection.
No, not at all. Seattle's chances are at 34.1%, and we estimate a 25.6% chance of a draw.
So basically it's a toss-up.
Pretty much. Our model has been accurate about 71.5% of the time in predicting similar matches.
Okay, 71.5%, not bad. Did you use the same data and analysis approach for this match as you did for the Miami game?
Yeah, the basic approach was the same. We used the same historical data, looked at team performance, expected goals, injuries, all that good stuff. The data preparation and creation of those advanced metrics were also very similar.
So same basic ingredients, different recipe.
You could say that. The specific number of data points used in the machine learning models might have varied a bit, but the overall methodology remained consistent.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, when you dug into the nitty-gritty of these two teams, did the Bayesian model uncover any standout players? Anyone who could potentially have a similar impact as Messi?
Well, for this match, the Bayesian model really focused on the overall attacking and defensive strength of each team, and of course, San Jose's home advantage. Both teams have their star players, but the source material didn't highlight anyone whose individual impact was projected to be on par with Messi's.
Got it. So more of a team effort for both San Jose and Seattle.
It seems that way.
Okay. So what did the model tell you about their relative strengths and weaknesses?
The model estimated San Jose's attack strength at 0.05 and their defense at 0.06. Seattle's attack came in higher at 0.21, and their defense was estimated at 0.18, and San Jose's home advantage was calculated at 0.29.
Home advantage of 0.29. Not insignificant. But I'm guessing you didn't rely solely on the Bayesian model, did you? You brought in the big guns, those machine learning models again.
You know us, we like to be thorough. So yep, we use the same set of models as before. Gradient boosting, random forest, the neural network, and our adapted ELO rating system.
All right, and I'm assuming you combined the predictions from all those models just like you did for the Miami game.
Exactly. We use the same Bayesian model averaging technique.
But the weights assigned to each model were a bit different this time around.
Right. The weights reflect how well each model has historically performed in predicting similar types of matchups.
So past performance matters.
It definitely does. In this case, the Bayesian hierarchical model had a weight of 41%, the neural network 29%, gradient boosting 18%, ELO 7%, and random forest 5%.
Interesting to see how the weight shifts depending on the specific match.
Yeah.
So all things considered, how did this combined model perform for the San Jose game?
It achieved an accuracy of 71.5% and an F1 score of 0.67.
Okay, so pretty solid, but not quite as accurate as the model for the Miami game.
That's right. The log loss was 0.54 and the Breyer score was 0.188.
All right, now let's talk about those pesky injuries again. Who's potentially out for San Jose, and how might that affect the game?
Well, the big news for San Jose is that Jeremy Ibabis is definitely out. He's got a hamstring injury.
That's a big blow for them.
It is. Rodriguez is questionable with a knee issue. It'll be a game-time decision. And Carlos Acapo had a calf strain, but is expected to be in the starting lineup.
So a mixed bag for San Jose,
Yeah.
okay. And what about the impact of these injuries on the actual game?
Our analysis suggests that these injuries could reduce San Jose's expected goals by around 0.24 and potentially weaken their defense by about 0.09 expected goals conceded. Overall, their win probability could decrease by around 7.1%.
7.1%? That's a pretty significant drop.
Yeah, losing Ebo Biss especially is a big loss for their attack.
All right, what about Seattle? What's their injury situation?
Well, they're also dealing with some key absences. Raul Ruidiaz is out with a hamstring injury.
Another hamstring. Is that going around?
Seems like it. And Oed Vargas is out with an ankle sprain. Jean Paulo, thankfully, seems to have recovered from his illness and is expected to play.
Okay, so some good news and bad news for Seattle. But how are these injuries likely to impact their chances?
We estimate that their attack could be weaker by around 0.21 expected goals, and their defense might be a bit more vulnerable by about 0.05 expected goals conceded. This translates to a potential win probability reduction of about 5.2%.
Okay, so both teams are missing key attacking players.
Yep, it should make for an interesting matchup.
Speaking of interesting matchups, let's talk about the weather in San Jose. What can we expect on Sunday?
Well, the forecast for PayPal Park is 65 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 18 degrees Celsius. There's a slightly higher chance of rain compared to the Miami game, about 10%. The wind will be pretty light coming from the northwest, and the humidity will be around 70%.
So, a bit cooler than Miami, but still pretty pleasant for soccer. How will these conditions likely influence the game?
Well, these are pretty mild conditions. The temperature is comfortable, and the wind isn't strong enough to have a significant impact. Our initial analysis suggested a tiny edge to the home team because of these conditions, but it's really minimal.
Got it. So weather's not a huge factor in this one.
Probably not.
All right. So let's put it all together. You've got the models, the injury reports, the weather. What's your final prediction for San Jose Earthquakes versus Seattle Sounders?
Our ensemble model gives San Jose a 40.3% chance of winning. Our confidence interval for this prediction ranges from 34.9% to 45.7%.
Okay.
The probability of a draw is 25.6%, likely falling between 21.2% and 30%. And Seattle's chances of winning are at 34.1%, with a confidence interval of 28.9% to 39.3%.
So, like we said earlier, a very close match. What about the expected goals and the most likely scorelines?
We expect San Jose to score about 1.42 goals and Seattle to score around 1.21, both with their own confidence ranges. The most likely scoreline is a 1-1 draw at 13.2%, followed by a 1-0 San Jose win at 11.2%, and a 0-1 Seattle win at 9.8%.
So, lots of possibilities. But the models are leaning towards a low-scoring game. What did those 50,000 simulations tell you about this match?
The simulations were very much in line with our main prediction.
Okay.
40.3% chance for San Jose to win, 25.6% chance of a draw, and 34.1% chance for Seattle. We also found a 42.3% probability of the match having over 2.5 total goals and a 58.7% chance of both teams scoring.
58.7% for both teams to score. That's interesting because it's actually higher than the both teams to score probability in the Miami game.
Yeah, it is. It just goes to show that even though the overall win probabilities are very close in this match, the dynamics of the game could be quite different.
Absolutely. So it seems like this match is truly a toss-up, even with all the data analysis.
That's the beauty of soccer.
But how confident are you in these predictions? I mean, this match seems even more unpredictable than the Miami game.
Well, our calibration analysis shows that the model is actually very well calibrated for these kinds of close matches. The mean and maximum errors are low, which means our probability estimates are pretty reliable.
That's good to know. But I'm assuming there's still a lot of uncertainty.
Of course, we estimate that about 73% of the uncertainty comes from the inherent randomness of soccer, and 27% comes from limitations in our models and data.
Okay, so even with all the analysis, there's still a good chunk of uncertainty.
That's part of what makes it so exciting to watch.
Absolutely. So for this San Jose versus Seattle game, what are the most important factors that went into your prediction?
Well, San Jose's home advantage is definitely playing a big role.
Right.
But Seattle's overall quality shouldn't be underestimated. The recent form of both teams is a factor, and the injuries, especially to key attacking players on both sides, are also very significant. The expected goals differential and their head-to-head record are also important contributors to the model's prediction.
Okay, so a lot of different factors in play here. Now, I'm curious, what are the betting markets saying about this match?
Well, the betting markets have San Jose with a slightly lower implied win probability at around 38% compared to our 40.3%.
Interesting.
And they give Seattle a slightly higher chance of winning at about 36% compared to our 34.1%. The odds on a draw are pretty similar to our prediction.
So some slight differences there.
Yeah.
Based on that, are there any potential value bets for this match?
Well, because the betting markets are giving San Jose slightly lower odds than our model, that could suggest there might be a slight value in betting on a San Jose win.
Okay.
We also see a moderate potential upside in betting on the game to have under 2.5 total goals.
So maybe a low-scoring affair.
It's definitely possible.
All right. Any last-minute updates on those injuries or the weather before we wrap up?
For San Jose, Ibodisse is definitely out, Rodriguez is still a game-time decision, and Akapo is expected to start. For Seattle, Ruidiaz is confirmed out, Vargas has been ruled out, and João Paulo is expected to be in the starting lineup. The weather forecast has been updated again, even lower chance of rain and a little warmer, but still not a major factor in our predictions.
Okay, good to know. So to sum up the San Jose versus Seattle deep dive, it looks like we're in for a very tight, very unpredictable match. A slight advantage to San Jose, mostly because of home advantage, but it really could go either way.
Exactly. And with both teams missing key attacking players, we might be in for a low-scoring game. But hey, you never know, right? That's soccer.
Absolutely. So let's recap both games. Miami versus Philly. The data points to a likely Miami win, potentially by a couple of goals. But for San Jose against Seattle, it's much closer, a real nail-biter.
Yep, that's a pretty good summary.
It's been really fascinating to see how you can take all these different pieces of information, from stats and injuries to even the weather, and come up with these predictions. But of course, we have to remember that there's always that element of chance, that unexpected moment of brilliance that can completely change the game.
100%. And that's what keeps us coming back for more, right?
Exactly. It's the unpredictability that makes soccer so captivating.
It really does. So as we wrap things up, I'd like to leave you with this thought. Despite all the sophisticated analysis, the stats, the injuries, the weather, what do you think, the listener, is the one factor, the one X factor that could completely blow up our predictions and lead to a totally unexpected outcome? Something to ponder as you watch these matches.
That's a great question. And on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back soon with more insights from the world of sports and beyond.